Welcome to historic Yellow Springs. Yellow Springs is a unique community of 18th and 19th century buildings that provides a continuing thread of events, lives, incidents, art, and service to our country. The village of Yellow Springs is a living village steeped in such distinguished history, tradition, and folklore that it stirs the imagination of those who visit. The village spans nearly 300 years of American history. As the vision of this unique place unfolds before you, you will see how the perfection of landscape was critical and became the background, the common thread woven throughout the centuries that entwined the people and events and provided the beauty and enchantment we enjoy today. Come and tour our village and learn of its special place in history. There is no village like it. Pre-colonial tradition holds that the Lenape Indians were the first to use and name the iron springs the Yellow Waters, and it is believed they used these waters for medicinal and ceremonial purposes. Archaeological evidence documents that the Lenape once occupied the site around our iron spring. As word of this yellow water reached the early settlers in Philadelphia, a stream of visitors made their way west of the city to partake of the medicinal qualities of these waters as early as 1722. The American colonist brought with him a long history of the use of medicinal or therapeutic waters throughout Europe, and not wanting to lose this source of health and pleasure, they sought mineral waters in the colonies and constructed resorts around them. So many were to converge at this site that by 1750, Robert Pritchard established the first tavern here to accommodate these travelers. This tavern was located on the site of the Washington today. Remnants of the foundation can be seen in the basement. The colonial spa thrived until the Revolutionary War came to Chester County. Following the Revolutionary War, the health spa was to open and reach new heights as one of the largest and most successful spas in the region. The fashionable spa saw new buildings, spring houses built, and a landscape of pathways and trails. Pritchard's Tavern was replaced by the Hall and Hotel. These two separate structures existed for guests and are of the late Federal style, which evolved from the early Georgian period in colonial America. A distinct Federal element is the fanlight on the brick room door, a lunar semi-elliptical window. The hotel includes the western section of the Washington, while the hall is our brick room with its distinctive brick floor dating to 1820. When the Pennsylvania Soldiers' Orphan School was established here in 1868 following the Civil War, the hotel became the boys' building, providing dormitory space on the upper floors and a dining room on the first floor where all children gathered for meals. The hall housed the sewing rooms where clothing was made for the children and served as the first infirmary. The hotel burned in 1876. And at that time, the two buildings were joined. The connection is evident as you view the Washington. The Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, known as PAFA, established its country school in the village in 1916, and they too utilized this building, calling it the Washington Building. The men lived here and all students dined here. Good News Productions, arriving in 1952, also dined on the first floor, but converted the upper dormitories to apartments for its staff, who all lived on site. Filming also took place here. Now renamed The Washington, this structure is managed as a venue for weddings, business functions, and other celebrations. This building began as a gathering place for lodging, drinking, dancing, and dining, and over the years it has retained its function. In 1830, a piazza was built to connect the inn and hotel to the cottage built in 1823. This is also known as a portico, which we call it today. This was a very significant element at all major spas in the day and became a symbol of status. While guests would promenade there to help digest the hearty meals served, these tall, white columned walkways and porches were the high activity of the day for seeing and being seen. Spas were judged by the length of their piazza. Our piazza remains a well-traveled walkway and a delightful spot to enjoy our graceful fountain and beautiful gardens. The Lincoln Building, known as the Cottage when it was built in 1823, housed spa visitors and was a stone structure of the late Federal style. The orphan school girls lived here. In 1899, this girls' building burned to the ground and was rebuilt in 1900 of wood frame, later stuccoed. While simple in design, it displays a gambrel roof. You will see that many architectural styles overlap in the village. Patha women artists took up residency here, and it became known as the Lincoln Building. Good News added apartments on the upper floors and administrative offices on the first. A major use was the viewing theater on the second floor, with projection room and authentic theater seating to view productions. A dark room for photography was also located here. Today, Historic Yellow Springs maintains its administrative offices as well as the Moore archives in this building. Significant are the gallery spaces used to host the renowned Yellow Springs Art Show and many of our programs and exhibitions presented yearly. As we cross the road, we can see the main house, also known as the Rosado House. The first level of the main house is believed to be built pre-Revolutionary War and houses a walk-in fireplace. Upper floors were added and innkeepers were to reside here, and it became a residence to the faculty of the orphan school, the director of the country school, and home of the Yeworth family during Good News productions. Today it is privately owned. It has evolved into the Gothic Revival style, also known as Victorian Gothic. Adjoining the main house during the spa era was an ice cream parlor, a billiard saloon, a 10-pin alley, and a barber shop. Looking west on Yellow Springs Road, we see the bungalow-style structure built in 1899 as the infirmary for this orphan school. The gardener for the country school lived here, and it is where Steve McQueen lived when filming The Blob. Later a rental property, it is now the home of the Chester Springs Library. As we descend into the meadow, we visit the gazebo, originally built in 1839. It houses our yellow water. This iron-laden water is the logos of our village, and the gazebo stands as the logo for historic Yellow Springs. It is believed to be designed by well-known architect Thomas U. Walter, designer of the dome of our Capitol in Washington, D.C., as well as other structures in the Philadelphia area. While Italianate in style, The gazebo invokes the vision of a Grecian temple with columns and a domed roof, and is a legacy to the water baths famous in Greek civilization. These waters were considered medicine under a dome. It has been restored many times over the years, but always in its original style. Adjoining the gazebo is the pool house. Also believed designed by Walter, this structure served as a luxurious bathhouse during the spa era. During the orphan school era, the building was converted to a laundry. When PAFA brought its country school here, the building was converted to a swimming pool with water pumped in via the adjoining stream. Changing rooms were added for men and women, and good times were had by all. A new roof and stabilized structural supports were installed in 1994, and it now awaits full restoration and utility. It too reflects the era of Gothic revival. As we cross the meadow to Yellow Springs Road, we will see the garage known as the Powerhouse. It housed the steam plant and became a support facility to the water and heating systems for the village. We will now stroll down Yellow Springs Road under the alley of sycamore trees and enter the Water Meadow Gardens. The Jenny Lind Spring House, formerly known as the Sycamore Spring House, greets us. Walter is also believed to have designed the Sycamore Spring House. Another Greek revival structure, this little open-air temple is secluded in the water meadow and houses the sulfur waters. It is reminiscent of the follies that were built on large estates in the day. Built of rubble stone, it was stuccoed and then scored and penciled to resemble large building blocks. The name change occurred in 1850 when the famous Swedish songstress Jenny Lind visited Yellow Springs to take the water. Restored in 1987, this is a decorative spot and was important to the PAFA artists as well as providing locations for Good News Films. Following the pathway, we cross the Dragonfly Bridge. The PAFA Country School came to Yellow Springs to afford fine art instruction in the open air with all the beautiful surroundings of nature herself. The South Meadow, with its spring houses and two adjoining Monet-like ponds with a wooden footbridge, was the perfect blending of nature and history. The bridge deteriorated over time and was replaced by the Dragonfly Bridge, designed and constructed by local artist and craftsman Jasper Brinton. Jasper looked to the Japanese prints that influenced the Impressionist painters and took the dragonfly motif often used. With the dragonflies also inhabiting the water meadow, he designed the bridge with the body of the insect at the center and the balustrades resembling the wings. The golden color is that of the iron water of our iron spring. The Crystal Diamond Spring was discovered in the 1850s. This magnesium water bubbles up from the ground, and visitors said it reminded them of crystal diamonds when the sun shone upon it. It still flows forth and sparkles today. A spring house was built at a later date and is of a basic style with a diamond cut opening in the roof to allow the sun to reflect on the bubbles. This structure may be the precursor of the arts and crafts movement of the 20th century with its simplicity and environmental qualities. The spring house was restored in 1989 and a new roof was added in 2019. The spring functioned as the principal water source for the village until Pennsylvania law forbade the use of open springs for consumption. It has always been an attractive spot for PAFA artists to gather to paint and is a reminder of the spa days. As we move up from the water meadow, we will cross a flat surface of land that was once the site of tennis courts established for the art students to enjoy recreation. Above is the Chester Springs studio. This small barn was used as a livery stable in early spa days when stagecoach horses, as well as horses for guests to ride, were stabled here. Horses for the boys at the orphan school to master their military drills were also housed here. While a basic stone barn, changes were made. A Gothic revival element is evident in its current windows. When artists arrived here, a skylight was added to capture the north light, and it became a sculpture studio. Good News Production used it as Studio A for its movies. When Yellow Springs purchased the village, the intent was to provide art classes. To fulfill this, the barn and 2 acres of land were sold and became the Chester Springs Studio. The studio merged back with historic Yellow Springs in 2007 and continues to thrive in bringing art to the village. The studio's ceramic studio is on the lower level with a wood-fired kiln under the O'Rourke Pavilion, built in 2019. This kiln is well known by ceramic artists throughout the region who come here to fire their work. There are other structures that complete the village but are privately owned. Moving through the meadow and looking right, we see the stunning 1845 Pennsylvania Bank barn that served agricultural needs at its construction. Then, PAFA removed the rear north wall and replaced it with windows, bringing in the north light for the sculptors who would work here. Many said when the sun streamed in the studio, it was like a cathedral and a wonderful place to work. Good News maintained its Studio C here for its film production. As owners, HYS leased the space to People's Light and Theater in its early founding days. Then, Historic Yellow Springs sold the barn to the performing arts group, the Yellow Springs Institute, in 1976, and they added the Conference Center addition in 1989. They also installed the Black Box Theater in the complex. The complex was sold again, and today it serves as the West Pikeland Township building, which hosts the SALT performing group in the Black Box. The police station adjoining the barn was once the chicken coop for the farm. Heading back into the village, we see the Jenny Lind House. Spa entrepreneur Margaret Holman built this stone building as a boarding house for the spa and called it Paradise. It reflects a variety of styles with its federal symmetry and Italianate arches. This large farmhouse accompanied the barn. PAFA utilized the house for a residency, and Good News Productions likewise used the space for apartments for its staff. Then it became a private residence. It remains in private hands and is undergoing a complete restoration by Life's Patina and the Haley family. The small cottage, known as the Haley House, was built in 1830 as a small residence. Over time, it was converted to a folk Victorian style when the peak was added to the roof. PAFA used the house for its caretaker, and it was later a private residence and then a rental property for historic Yellow Springs. Today, the Haley family has restored the house to its former style and manages it as a rental. Today, we see Connie's house, which was the site of the general store during the spa days, serving guests and the community at large. A millinery shop was located here, and gingham, calicos, and fine silk could be purchased along with parasols. It also provided groceries, paint, ironmongery, as well as mackerel by the barrel. The Yellow Springs Post Office was established in the general store in 1815, but the name was changed to the Chester Springs Post Office in 1827. These services were continued in this same house that hints of Gothic revival as well as folk Victorian until the 1960s, when the store closed and the post office moved to Pennsylvania Route 113. Then it served as a rental property until owner Connie Fraley, who was the founder of Historic Yellow Springs and the founder of the Chester Springs Studio, gifted it to the studio. With the merger, it is now part of Historic Yellow Springs and has been used for exhibitions and studio space. Today, it is waiting restoration to continue its use in the village. We invite you now to take a walk up the hill to the Revolutionary War Hospital Ruins Memorial. Known as Washington Hall, it was the first military hospital built in America. Known as the Philadelphia Campaign of 1777, the Revolutionary War came to Chester County. General Washington retreated to the village of Chester Springs following the Battle of the Clouds in the Malvern area, arriving the morning of September 17, 1777. He set up temporary headquarters in Pritchard's Tavern, accompanied by his senior aide-de-camp, Alexander Hamilton. He then marched to replenish ammunition and cannon at the furnaces which were located west of here, and eventually he set up his winter encampment 1777 to 1778 at Valley Forge. Realizing he would have no army to fight for independence if something was not done to alleviate the medical conditions, and quickly, he petitioned the Continental Congress requesting a medical facility be built. Thus, this first military hospital was erected here at Yellow Springs. This colonial frame structure served the Continental Army until 1781, when it closed. Following the Revolutionary War, the health spa was to reopen. The old hospital building, as it was referred to, now became a large hotel. Following the Civil War, the old hospital became the schoolhouse and chapel for the orphan children. The children walked up to the school on a covered walkway, and today we walk the same pathway to this site. However, it is not covered. Fire destroyed the school in 1902 when an orphan boy who had been disciplined set the fire. It was rebuilt in the same style and continued as the school. The orphan school closed in 1912. When Paffa took ownership in 1916 and pursued en plein air painting, the old hospital was a perfect spot for indoor studios when inclement weather prevailed. Students tell of presenting plays here and also playing volleyball there as well. When Paffa closed its school in 1952, Good News utilized the old hospital for its Studio B for filming, as well as a recording studio with production library. Fire once again consumed the facility in 1962, and all was lost, causing the company to put the village up for sale. The hospital was not to be rebuilt again. Desiring to share the extraordinary history of the Revolutionary War Hospital and the colonial military medicine, telling the story of those who suffered and served here, as well as to celebrate the anniversary of the U.S. Constitution in 1987, Yellow Springs launched a program to restore the ruins. It was decided to revere the stones and let them tell the story. The Herb Society of America Philadelphia unit joined this commemoration by establishing an 18th century medicinal herb garden to interpret the medicine practiced at the time. The unit continues to maintain this site enjoyed by all who visit and the many weddings that have taken place here. Reverend Dr. James Sproat, itinerant hospital chaplain during the Revolutionary War, wrote in his journal after a visit to the Yellow Springs Hospital. He said, "A great deal of goodness of heart takes place here," and so it continues. Walk down the pathway to our lovely courtyard garden and observe the gigantic and ancient sycamore tree on your right. This magnificent specimen has witnessed much of the history that you are learning on your tour. And as you look up, you will see the rusted bracket that once held the dinner bell that summoned children and artists to dinner. The village of Yellow Springs provides us with an open-air museum as we walk this roadway and the pathways. We are able to identify a variety of architectural styles that have evolved over time beginning in 1722. These structures have endured, shown resilience, and proved their ability and utility, meeting the needs of people and events over different eras of our history. Their stability has withstood the rigors of time and have been able to adapt to new needs. The beauty and art of the buildings and grounds combine to present an aesthetically pleasing vista. Our founders wanted to create and maintain Yellow Springs as a center for the encouragement of activities and programs related to history and the arts, the conservation of the cultural heritage, and the nurture of an aesthetic and physical environment. It is, they said, the blending of the buildings and nature, enhanced by the historic associations, which affords a lasting artistic impression of Yellow Springs. These principles are what our founders strived for in 1974, and the goal has been met. Our village is on the National Register of Historic Places and is listed as the Historic District for West Pikeland Township. History, the architecture, the arts, and the national environment live here and combined are alive and well. It awaits present and future visitors to experience this place of unsurpassed healing, inspiration, respite, and creativity. We thank all those who have walked this village and its pathways for nearly 300 years and left their legacy at this remarkable place. And we invite you to come and visit our village and enjoy this legacy. There is no village like it.